pay him off. The Gemara
At the
is
two dots, wasn't it?
yeah, pay him off up to 3 lines on top of the page. And we spoke about that if you bring the blood in of a carbon that belongs on the outside, you brought it into the base of Hamikdash, it disqualifies the carbon. And we had an argument whether you had to have in mind to actually to use it to do you have to just bring it in as soon as you brought it in, disqualified it, or only when you sprinkle it, sprayed on his bath, does it become disqualified? And then we had a third opinion, which said that if you brought it in, Rabbi Yehuda said that if you did it by mistake, then it doesn't count. But if you did it on purpose, it does. But he doesn't explain on purpose and you just brought it in, or you actually have to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. The first thing Gemara explains the basis of their argument, why one says that you have to sprinkle on the mizbeach, and one says just bringing it in is sufficient. Says the Gemara, 3 lines on top. Nichnas lechape, you brought it in. As soon as you brought it in order to use it, but it brought it in, it's already ruined it. Tanya, we learned. What's going on here? Why does Rabbi Lezer say that as soon as you brought it in? And why does Rabbi Shimon say that only after you used it and sprayed the blood itself? So Tanya, Rabbi Lezer, because we're going to learn basically is when it says in the pasuk, you brought the blood inside into the base of Migdash, it says lichaper ba'kodesh, in order to seek atonement. Not clear from that where you're just going to just bring it in to seek atonement, or you actually did the act of bringing atonement, which is sprinkling the blood. But we can use the word lechaper b'kodesh for gzeres shava. We find two other psukim which has the same words lechaper b'kodesh, but one of the psukim is talking about just entering the room to be mechaper. That's already sufficient, and the other pasuk discusses where you actually sprinkled the blood. And the question is, which one are we going to use as our reference point for the lechaper b'kodesh by bringing the blood inside and ruining it? So the Gemara brings here two opinions. Tanya will the Brayso says nemakan. It says over here if you bring it inside the lechaper b'kodesh. I'm not sure what that means. But the Nemla says another passage where it talks about Yom Kippur. It says that the Kohen Gadol enters the Holy of Holies, the Kohen of Hiroshim. It says in the passage that no other person should be in that room when he walks in lechaper b'kodesh. And there, as soon as he walks into the room, already no one else should be in the Kodesh of Kedoshim. So lechaper b'kodesh there means just to go in order to go to be mechaper. Didn't do anything yet. So it's never says further by Yom Kippur, nobody should be in the when he goes in to do this. Malahalon, just like over there, Mishalei Kippur, doesn't have to actually do anything. Just walking in the room is sufficient to make sure no one else is there. And the Torah refers to it as Lichaper B'Kodesh. The same thing as an Afkan. So the same thing over here. It talks about Mishalei Kippur. Over here also it's talking about that he didn't do anything. That you didn't, that even though you didn't sprinkle the blood, just bringing the blood into the base of Mikdash ruins it. However, Rab Shimon says no. There's another pasuk where we have the word lechaper b'kodesh, and over there, lechaper b'kodesh means you actually did do the act of being mechaper. And what's the story there? Nemakan says over here lechaper b'kodesh. It says over here lechaper b'kodesh. The Nemar Lahal, it says later on regarding the kabbanas of Yom Kippur, it says over there's par hachatas, vesira chatas. These two kabbanas, the bull and the goat of the chatas, asher huva as damam, you brought their blood into the base of Mikdash Yom Kippur, lechaper, and there it says you brought it into to atone b'kodesh, and then it says, and after you sprinkle the blood, you take all the remnants out and you burn it outside. And there it says, now when you take it to burn, obviously you already sprinkled the blood. So there, lechaper b'kodesh means you actually did it. Malahalam b'shekipah, you already did the kapara. Is afkan over here also b'shekipah, you already did the kapara because you can only burn it after you did it. He's a ma'ivim. Why does one of them decide to learn from the person, the Kohen Gadol, be in the Kodesh Kodashim? Another one learns it from the bull and the goat that you did on Yom Kippur. Let's compare two similar cases. What are two similar cases? In the case over here, the chatas belongs outside, you brought it in. And the other case in Yom Kippur is the Kohen Gadol is the only one should be in there, and everyone else should be outside. So we're comparing things that don't belong there, that are outside. Don't compare the case of a chatz that belongs outside and you want to compare it to the parachatas, irchatas, which belong inside. That's not a good similarity. However, the other one says, no, I'd rather done in behema. We're talking about the blood of an animal from the outside, you brought it inside. Let's compare it to another case of an animal which says the same words, it's in the right place, is where it belongs, but it's an animal, par and a soyer. So therefore, it makes sense for animals to be compared to animals. And here it says the word lechapa b'kodesh, and there it says, so it means you actually sprinkle the blood. The ain't done in behem bodam. What are you comparing it to? Iron, Kohen Gadol, and all that. Can't compare it. Says the Gemara further. Now the third opinion was Rabbi Yehuda. He said that if he did it b'shegi inadvertently, then he didn't disqualify. Haba mezid. Rabbi Yehuda haba mezid. He did it deliberately possible. But who does he hold like? Does he hold only after you sprayed it, or even just bringing it in? So the Gemara says, "B'shekipper or like keeper? Does he have to? You actually have to spray it or not?" So he brings a brisa, and from the brisa he gleans what Rabbi Yehuda holds. It says in the pasuk was parachatas hashahuva damam. Regarding a kippur, it says the parachatas irchatas. He brought the blood in. You have to go out there and burn the remnants. Lechaper b'kodesh. And then the next pasuk says, and the one who went out there to burn this remnants has to immerse his clothes in the mikveh because they became tamei. So the brisa continues. What does the next pasuk say? The one who burns it has to purify his clothes. What is Gemara asks? What do you need it for? You need that pasuk to teach you that very halacha. It's need it for itself. Why does the pasuk say? What we're asking is, it says twice the word chat. It says par hachatos ve'seira chatos. Why is it? It's redundant. All we know is that which carbon that you burn the remnants outside the base of Mikdash. Which carbon do we know that happens, and that the clothes become tummy? Only regarding a kippur. How do you know all other carbonas that you bring inside the base of Mikdash and you burn the remnants outside? The person that does the burning also has to wash his clothes, has to immerse his clothes. All we know is they get burnt at Beis Hadeshen. They get burnt outside the base of Mikdash, the Beis Hadeshen. Mitamim begotten have to their clothes become tummy. Shani Srafin Minayin. How do you know other kabbanas that are brought inside, and then you burn the remnants outside? How do you know that the person who burns it outside the base of Mikdash clothes become tummy? If it says chatas, the next word chatas teach you to expand it to other kabbanas as well. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So was that proof? What does it have to do with what we're talking about it here? The chaper b'kodesh, whether it means you sprinkle it didn't. We don't know yet. So he continues. We don't need the word chatas for that. How do you just read the pasuk verse parachatas, sirachatas, she'ain't tamad leimer lechaper. Then the pasuk says that and you brought it in to atone. Obviously, why are you bringing the sirachatas, sirap? You're doing it to atone. Why does the pasuk have to say lechaper? That you bring limit to teach you. I'll call hamischapim. Any animal that you bring inside the inner mizbeach in order to atone, anyone that does the burning of those remnants, their clothes become tamei. So where does Rameh learn from the word lechaper b'kodesh? That's so obvious. I mean, you just read the pasuk. That's what it says. Lechaper. That's to say any animal that does kapara, and the inner mizbeach is burned outside. So why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda learn from this lechaper b'kodesh as well? Unless for him, these words lechaper b'kodesh is needed for something else, for gzera shava. A gzera shava to teach you when it comes to the blood being brought inside lechaper b'kodesh should be treated just like the case of the animals in Yom Kippur, which is only after you spray the blood. Rabbi Yehuda, because that's when you take it out to burn it. Rabbi Yehuda lechaper lemashale. My time isn't it? What's the reason? Lav isn't it from the b'boy lezer shava? He needs those words for the gzera shava. Therefore, he learns from chatas to tell you that it doesn't not only limited to this chatas but to other kabbanos as well. Hadin Allah kol Zevachim Daf. So the Mishnah now continues. We're talking about things that become possible. We bring it in. Now we're going to talk about things we already discussed before. Things that were disqualified. If you placed it on the mizbeach, leave them there. So we have a couple of psukim. One pasuk says, "Kol negeya b'migdash, kol mizbeach yidosh." Anything that touches the mizbeach becomes holy. That's one thing. And now we're going to also learn from a pasuk Zois Torah Sa'ola. These are the laws of the Oila. Al Moikda Al Mizbech. These are laws of the Oila that go on the fire on the Mizbech, and it says it's a he Oila, and we say what it remains an Oila even while it's on the fire, and maybe it doesn't belong there. Leave it there. It remains an Oila. And we'll see later if it falls off the mizbech, a proper thing that belongs there, fell off, you put it back on. You don't just say, "Well, I did it; it's all right." You put it back on. So, I just look. Yeah. So the Mishnah says, first is an opening statement in the Mishnah, and then we're going to have actually 3 opinions in the Mishnah and 2 opinions in the Gemara. Like, what do we say that incorporates any carbon that if it became possible, you put on the mizbech, it remains there, or only certain psulim remain on the mizbech and certain don't? So first, an opening statement from Rabbeinu Kodesh. HaMizbech v'kadosh v'sarola. The mizbech sanctifies anything which is suitable, as if to say, but if it's not, now what that means, we don't know yet. We're going to argue. But what it means is definitely that everyone agrees is, but if it's not suitable, if it's unsuitable, it doesn't go on mizbech. For example, if, let's say, when it comes to a carbon mincha, the carbon mincha is placed in a clay shardus in a vessel of the base of Mikdash, then the kohen has to come along and do kmitza, and to do kmitza, which means to scoop out the 3 fingers worth and take it out. And then the next step is he must put it into a clay shardus, another vessel from the base of Mikdash, and then put it on the mizbech. If he bypasses that middle step, in other words, he did the kmitza and goes straight to the mizbech and place it on the mizbech, it's not suitable to Mizbech, has no connection to Mizbech yet. You need to place the kmitza in the clay sharis. So that's called Einu Ro'olai. It's unsuitable. So the Mizbech is only Mekadosh thing which are Ro, but not the case where you did not place the kmitza into a clay sharis. Now, let's talk about Ro a bit more specific. If it's suitable for the fire, in other words, it's something that, as we'll soon see what it comes to negate or exclude. If it's something that is suitable for the fire of Mizbech, fine. All of the other. Once it's up there, you don't take it down. Remember, the pasuk says, it says in the pasuk, Zois Torah Sa'ila. These are the laws of the Oila. He ha'Oila. This is the Oila. Al Moikta, on the fire, on Mizbech. So something that belongs to the fire, and for whatever reason became possible, you put on Mizbech, leave it there. Ma oila shiru lishim suitable for the fire. Im also if it goes up there, you don't take it down. Av kosher ro lishim, anything which is suitable for the fire. Im all you don't take it down. Rav Gamliel says the next word in the pasuk is al moikda, on the fire, al hamizbeach. He says, let's expand it. Anything which is connected to the mizbeach, even though it's not suitable for the fire, once you put it up, then leave it there. What's connected to the mizbeach that's not suitable for the fire? The blood. The blood does not go on the fire, but you have to sprinkle the blood on the mizbech. So you take that blood by mistake, you put it on top of the mizbech, leave it there, according to Rabbi Gamliel. According to Rabbi Shua, no. If you don't do with the fire, take it off, remove it. The same thing with the libations that come with the carbon. A libation that comes with the carbon, it doesn't go on the mizbech, it goes down the chutes. So it's connected to the mizbech, but it's not on the fire. Again, the same argument. As Mishnah will spell it out. Now, Gemara says, "Kol harol mizbech." Anything suitable for the mizbech, it goes up there. You don't take it down. So it says, "He ha'oila al moida al hamizbech." Ma oila shiru mizbech, just like the oila which is suitable mizbech. Im also leted. If it goes up there, you don't take it down. Av kol davar shiru mizbech. Anything suitable mizbech. Im also leted. It goes up, you don't take it down. It says, and the Mishnah spells it out. Ein bein divir and gamliel divir v'shur. There's no difference between the two. Ela hadam v'hanasachim. Regarding the blood and the libations. Gamliel says it's connected to Mizbech, leave it there. Rabbi Shua says yerdu. Rabbi Shua says if it's not suitable, connected to the fire on the Mizbech, remove it. Comes along Rabbi Shimon, and he said like this: when it comes to blood, I agree with Rabbi Gamliel. It's connected to Mizbech. You put it up there, leave it there. When it comes to libations, I will tell you there are 2 kinds of libations. There's libations which are ancillary to a carbon. You bring a carbon, it comes together with libations. Those libations are ancillary to carbon. They're not independent. And therefore, we're going to learn that if you put it, if it became possible, you place them as bech, they don't belong there, remove them. But then you have another kind of libation, which is a donation. It's on its own. It's not connected to anything else. Those libations are like anything else. If it became puzzle and you placed it on top of the mizbech, leave it there. Says the Mishnah Rabbi Shimon Omer, Hazevach kosher. If you have a kosher carbon, but the nesachim sulim, the libations became disqualified. You left them overnight, for example, or you took them outside the base of Mikdash. Became tummy. Hanesachim. Another example, the nesachim became kosher, but the zevach puzzle, the carbon became puzzle. Or afilu zev is epsul, or even they were both puzzle. So you would think that in that case, the carbon and then if the nesachim puzzle and the carbon is puzzle, then the carbon, since the nesachim don't belong in the bech, maybe the carbon doesn't belong either. Nevertheless, hazevach layed, the carbon, we ignore the libation. So the carbon, even though it's puzzle, leave them on the mizbech, but the nesachim you have to remove from the mizbech.
No,
Because they are not an independent existence, they're ancillary to something else. And
can you hear me? Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
How would the Kohen physically remove, if he's put the blood up there or libations, how would you physically remove from a fire the...
Let's say it's in a keli. You put it in the vessel.
Are you meant to burn the keli?
No. The keli won't burn. It's like you put it next to the fire and it's boiling up.
Right, okay.
Remember, you did Kabbalah in the keli. You didn't. The blood that you sprayed. The blood that's remaining in the keli, you placed on the mizbech.
Okay. Yep.
Says the Gemara. First thing Gemara spells out what we just said before. Rebbe's opening statement was, if it's roll, if it's appropriate for the mizbech, fine. And she'ein roll, if it's not, loy. L'muti mai. What are you coming to exclude? Amar Rapapa. Rapapa say, no, it comes to exclude. It comes to exclude. Kamatzin shaloi kitchen b'keli. You did a flower offering. The kohen did the kmitza. The flower offering sits in a clay sharis, and the kohen in a sacred vessel. And the kohen did the kmitza, but did not place it into a clay sharis, and then placed it on the bech. You take it off. You remove it. So now, just very quickly, the laws of the understand what belongs to the mizbech, what doesn't is we have a concept called me'ila. Me'ila is if you use something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, you're stealing. That's what me'ila is. So what happens if let's say kachim, the moment you consecrated the animal and you use it for your own benefit, you're stealing. And depending on the Roshei, you made it, but you're stealing because it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. But by kachim, once you sprinkle the blood, the meat goes to the kohenim, and the fats and the limbs, they go on the mizbech. So the fats and limbs remain the property of the mizbech. You use it for yourself, you're stealing. But the meat, the moment you spray the blood, the meat now no longer belongs to the mizbech, and therefore, if you use it for yourself, you're no longer moil. Somebody uses it for their own purpose, no longer moil, but no longer belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Those are the laws of kachim. Kachim kalim, shlamim, is exactly the reverse. By shlamim, we say, well, I consecrated the animal, but does not belong to the Beis Hamikdash yet. I'm still responsible for it, and so on. It's only after I sprinkle the blood. Now the fats and the limbs belong to the mizbech, so that now is the property of the Beis Hamikdash, and the meat stays the way it is. There's no meila there. There's no kedusha there. That's the by a carbon mincha as well. We say that you place the carbon mincha into this clay sharis, and only after you do the kmitza, which is like sprinkling the blood. The kmitza by a vase is like sprinkling the blood. After you do the kmitza, and you put it after you do the kmitza, and you put it in clay sharis, now it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Now it belongs to the property of Mizbech, and that's what we said before, that only after you did the kmitza, you place clay sharis, and it became possible, you place the mizbech, it belongs to it. Because you had to have a connection to the mizbech before we say that if you place it there, leave it there the way it is. So it says the Gemara here, it says the Gemara, I don't understand. So you're telling me if you didn't do the kmitza properly, you didn't put in a clay sharis, doesn't belong to the mizbech. So that's a question. How is it different in Ula, which we'll learn the Gemara next day? Ula said, the fats of kachim kalim, when do they have a connection to the mizbech? Only after you sprinkle the blood. But before you sprinkle the blood, They belong to the owner. There's no connection to the mizbech. Yet Ula says, "Shehel leaf nezik." If you place it on the mizbech before you sprinkle the blood, damon the blood la yerdu does not go down. You just said that only if it has a connection to the mizbech does it remain there. So here, and therefore by mincha, if you did the kmitza but you didn't place it in klei sharis, so there's no connection to the mizbech, you have to remove it. So how come Ula says by a kachim kalim, if you placed the fats of a kachim kalim before you spray the blood, it has no connection to the mizbech, leave it there. It's a difference. Nasa lachma shel mizbech, it becomes is owned by the mizbech and therefore it remains there. So he said there's a difference. The difference is, you're right. The emurim of the kachim kalim do not belong to the mizbech yet, but they already have a potential to go on the mizbech. What do you mean? There's nothing you have to do with the emurim in order for it to become properly mizbech. You have to do something with the blood. Spray it on the mizbech, which is extraneous to the emurim. I mean, the emurim within itself already has a potential and the connection towards the mizbech. So therefore, by the emurim, we say that even though you didn't spray the blood, if you placed it on the mizbech, leave it there. But when it comes to the case of the kmitza doesn't yet have that potential connection to the mizbech because you first have to put it, the very kmitza you have in your hand, you have to place in a klei sharis, in a vessel. So it's one more step removed from the mizbech, and that's why it has no connection to the mizbech. You place a mizbech, remove it. So the Gemara. Hanoch, in the case of the fats, there's nothing left to be done with the fats itself, other than sprinkling the blood, which is extraneous to the fats. Here it's still missing something with it itself. Here in the kmitza, you have to place it in a klei sharis. Second one further, Rabbi Shua says, now the Gemara explains the argument between Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Shua says if it's connected to the fire, because he stresses the word moik, the fire. The Gamliel says we emphasize the word mizbech, anything connected to mizbech, including the blood, including the nesachim. You place the mizbech, leave it there. So what's going on here? What's the argument? Second one, Nami Haksiv, it says in the pasuk oila al maita. What's the Gamliel saying in the mizbech? It says in the pasuk clearly the oila was sitting on top of the fire, which sound like only those things which connected to the fire of the mizbech, not just the mizbech itself. So he says no. You know what I do with the word al maita? Ahu la adure paikin hudasa. Okay, what happens? You put things that do belong in the fats and the limbs, they belong on the top of the mizbech, you put it on the fire, and then in the middle of roasting, whatever it is, it popped. You know, it was a lot of moisture there. It popped and it jumped off the mizbech. Do you have to put it back on? And you say, look, I put it on the fire, it burnt partially, that's good enough. We say you have to put it back on. How do you know? And that's where the word maikta comes in. It says maikta on the fire to tell you that it's the fire that it already was connected to. Maikda. It doesn't say make it fire, it says make its fire, as if there was already connection to the fire before you're putting it back on again. Why? Because it was there before. It was there previously. That's how I use the word make the for. Nothing to do with that only things were connected to the fire mizbech, leave it on the mizbech. Therefore, I use the word mizbech to tell you any connected mizbech is good enough. So the first man who learned some make the Rabbi Yeshua, how does he know this din that you place back things that belong there and fell off, you put it back on? He learns it from a different pasuk altogether. Nafkale, he learns it from the pasuk where it says the kohen has to put on over his clothing and to remove the ashes. It says to take the ashes away, from those things that the fire consumed. Now the obvious question is, ashes can only be from a fire consumed, burnt through something. Why does the pasuk have to say that fire consumed? So he said, I learned from there that the fire has to burn through and through, and therefore, if it fell off in the middle of burning, got to put it back on. So that's where I learned the din of piking. So Gamliel says he uses al-maikta for piking. What does he do with this other pasuk? He needs something else. He needs, you know what? La'akule oila atamachzir. Only kabbanas that fell off, you put it back on. What about the ketores, the incense, the inner mizbech? It fell off, you put it back on. You would have thought you should do that as well. And that's what it says. That's what it says here. It's extra pasuk to tell you that only kabbanas and not ketores, because ketores is there mainly for fragrance, and once it's sort of charred, there's no point to put it back on because it won't generate any more fragrance. So therefore, that's what it says fire. It talks about that the fire ate up the. It says in pasuk, ala mizbech. To tell you about only the oil or the kabbanis, but not when it comes to keteris. Says the Gemara. How do I know this? Only leftover remnants or curry put back on, but not the residual of potatoes. If it fell over the back, you don't put it back on. Says the Gemara, "Nu v'idach." So how does he know that? So he answers, "Lav memela shaminan." He says that it's automatic that we know that that the parts of a carbon you actually put back. You don't need a special pasuk for that. You don't need to have the extra words to put it back on there. It makes sense. You have to burn it through, and if it fell off, you got to put it back on. The only thing I use this pasuk for is to tell you, but not Okteris. Says okay, Rav Gamliel, what did he learn? He stresses the word mizbech. Right? The main thing, as long as the connection is mizbech, and if it became possible, you put it on mizbech, leave it there. How does he know that? Let me go it over. Be sure, but now it says mizbech because he says that we focus on the next word. Al moita ala mizbech. He needs so what's Rabbi Shua doing mizbech? He needs that the Torah is giving you a reason. My time at Kamarachman is giving you a reason. Why is it that if it's suitable to the fire, you leave it there because it belongs to the mizbech, and therefore, even though it's disqualified, leave it there. Mikadosh mizbech. Anything that's through the fire, the mizbech makes holy, and the Torah is giving you a reason. The idach, and Gamil agrees. You're right. This is not the pasuk I learned it from, because you could say the Torah is giving you a reason. Why is it once you place it there, you leave it there on the fire? Because the mizbech already sanctified it. So where do I know that anything connected to the mizbech, if it became possible, leave it there, including blood and libations? From another pasuk, it says there that you should leave it 7 days if the mizbech of atones, and you should make it holy. Kodesh Kedoshim. It says the Mizbech will be holy, and Kol Hanageh b'Mizbech Kodesh. It says the pasuk Kol Hanageh b'Mizbech. Anything that touches the Mizbech becomes holy, clear. Doesn't matter if it's the fire or any part of the Mizbech, the blood, the libations. V'idach nu Rabbi Shua, what does he do with that pasuk? So he says, I'll tell you what. No, I think only things to do with fire. But there's two kinds of things. That's something that was you shechted it properly, but there's something happened afterwards with the blood. It became puzzle. It went out of the base of Migdash. You made a tummy, whatever it is. So you started out right. So already had a connection to the mizbech, and then something went all right. So I say, you know what? You place the mizbech, leave it there. What about something that from the very outset, from the shechita, you had in mind the wrong time, the wrong place? Even the shechita was no good. So never really had a connection to the mizbech. How do I know if you place that mizbech, you don't remove it? That's why I need two psukim. But they're both talking about only things to do with the fire. One is telling you about where it started out right, then went wrong. Never had a shasakosha. And the other one, even I don't need two psukim for that, because I say, once they're puzzled, the Rabbeinu Rachman says, I don't care the puzzle, go place it. Who cares if it's shasakosha or not? So if I only need one pasuk for that, and the other part say that not only things to do with the fire, but even things that connected to the mizbech, called a negeya b'mizbech, yikdash becomes holy. Then comes Rav Shimon, and he says hazevar kosher. He says that mincha is ancillary to a carbon, and therefore, when it comes to the libations, he said the nesachim are ancillary to a carbon. When it comes to the libations, and if it goes on the mizbech, you remove them. But the dam, I agree that it's connected to mizbech. Up there, leave it there. Tanya, it says in the pasuk, Zois Toidas Oila here Oila Moitam Mizbech. He says, what do we know about Oila? Ma Oila. I say, just like the carbon Oila Habobik Halatzman is on its own, right? It's not ancillary to anything else. Av Kalaboy Megalatzman, so anything else that's there on its own and became possible, you place it as Mizbech, leave it there. Yotzu, the exception is the Sachim Haboyim Megal Zavach. Exception is the Sachim that come because of a carbon. They're ancillary, they're attached to another carbon, then you have to remove them. Now, we're going to have two more opinions. So we have so far three in our Mishnah. We have in the Brisa now two more, Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Akiva. They both are going to learn from Oilu, or another word, that this din only applies to animals. It only applies to animals, and that is that animals, if you place it on the mizbech, you can't possibly leave it there. But when it comes, for example, to a flower offering, not like our mission that says a flower offering that you put on mizbech, you leave it there. The only time you remove it is if you did not do the kmitzvah correctly. But if you did do the kmitzvah correctly, then it became possible, you leave it there. They say no. Only animals we say that, like an oila, but not flower offerings. So says the Gemara. Rabbi Yitzchak says, but it says, anyone touches bed becomes holy. Shemei, I would have thought ben ro, whether it's suitable or not. Tamloima, the next pasuk says, this is what you should do on the mizbech: kvasim, lambs, sheep. Kvasim. What the next pasuk talk about sheep? Ma kvasim ruin, just like sheep are suitable to the mizbech. Af kol ro, things which are suitable, but it has to be like an animal, not a flower offering. Not less. So he argues with our Mishnah. Rabbi Kiva says similarly, but he learns it from the word oila. Ma oila ru'uya, just like the oila is suitable to the zbech, av kol ru'ah, something suitable, but not a flower offering. So before we get to that, my benayu. So what's the argument whether you learn from sheep or whether you learn from oila? What are they arguing about? What about our oila? What about a bird? A bird is not a sheep, but a bird can still be an oila. So according to Rabbi Kiva, if you a disqualified bird placed on his back, leave it there. According to Rabbi Yisrael, no. One of them learns from oila, and one of them learns from kvasim. Well, the man, the kvasim, the one who learns from kvasim, but the fact is another pasuk says clearly oila, which sounds like even a bird. No, he said I need oila to help understand, be a bit more descriptive about kvasim, but it's all about animals. Why? Iksiv kvasim v'loiksiv oila. Had it said only lambs, sheep, it would not have mentioned oila. Have never thought. Afilim achai. What if an animal wanders on the ramp? A live animal. Do we say, well, belongs not to the zbeich, it's holy, we got to shecht it right then and there? So if it would have said kvasim, that's what we would have thought. By saying oila, and the pasuk I was talking about already, after you shechted, it's only the parts of the oila going on the zbeich. We now know, we're talking about parts. But really, what is it? It's all about kvasim, animals. And not even a bird. Because I'm on oila. No, well, the man that my salama oila, according to learns from the word oila, it includes birds as well. Haksiv kvasim, but the other part says kvasim only sheep. He says again, I need kvasim to help understand oila. Imaksiv oila kvasim. I would have thought I feel a mincha. I would have thought oila could be anything, including a flower offering. Because Rahman kvasim only animal offerings. Even though you could bring a mincha oila, that's not what is included. Is ma'ika bein hani tanoi the masnisin. So what's the difference between Rabbi Yisrael Glila Rabbi Kiva in the Brisa versus Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah? He says the difference is the difference is a flower offering. If you did it correctly, kamotzim, you did a kmitza, shekotcha bekeli, you place it into a keli, and then possibly you place it on the mizbech. Ike benayu. The tanoi did on our Mishnah lo yerdu. Once it's up there, leave it there. The tanoi the masnita, but tanoi the Brisa yerdu, you gotta remove it. So now comes along the Shlakish, gives us a very nice overview of all the different opinions. We'll give you 4 different scenarios, and each one what they would hold. So he goes through the 4 cases. The Shlakish says, mincha haba b'fnas. If you have a carbon mincha, that is a donation on its own. So in our Mishnah, they hold that a carbon mincha became possible, it belongs in the Mizbeach, leave it there. Rab Shimon says that a mincha, if he brought it on its own, it belongs on his bech, leave it there. But Rabbi Yossi Haglul and Rabbi Kiva both say only animals. So mincha, you have to remove it. That's what he says. Mincha haba bifnei atzma comes on its own. The divrei called and according everyone in our Mishnah like doesn't come down. The divrei Rabbi Yossi Hagluli and Rabbi Kiva, but according to Rabbi Kiva, leave it there. Teidei, you take it down, you remove it because it doesn't belong on the mizbech. Okay. Now, what about a mincha haba ima zevach? If the mincha is ancillary to a carbon, so even though Rabbi Shua and Gamliel and Mishnah say, well, if it became possible, you brought it up there, leave it there because it's connected to the mizbech or to the fire. But Rabbi Shimon says if it's part of a carbon, since it's only ancillary, it's secondary to the carbon, it doesn't belong in the mizbech. So he on its own. So he says here, it doesn't belong in the mizbech, and Gamliel definitely hold it doesn't belong in the mizbech. The divrei is a mincha haba im hazevach. The divrei I'm going to be sure leave it. The divrei kulam and the rest tated you have to remove it. Next case, nusachim. Haboyim b'fnei atzma. The sachim that come on its own. So again, everyone in our Mishnah will have an argument. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Shimon both say leave it there, but Rabbi Yeshua says only if it has to do with the fire on the mizbech. The sachim don't belong there. The divnei kulan yerdu, and then so according to Rabbi Yeshua you remove it, and according to Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yisrael, whoever is the majority, he calls it divnei kulan. And according to Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yisrael, definitely it's not an animal. You have to remove it. But the divrei Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, but according to Rabbi Gamliel, says anything connected to the mizbech, and according to Rabbi Shimon, that says that if the nesachim is brought on its own, you leave it there. Is lo yedu, you don't remove it. What about the nesachim labayin ima zevach? Nesachim that come with a zevach, so it comes with a zevach. So Rabbi Shimon also would say it doesn't belong on the mizbech because it's a secondary and therefore doesn't count. So then you'll have Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yasi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shua, because it's not connected to a fire, that say remove it. Only the lone opinion is Rabbi Gamliel. Kula, yerdo. Rabbi Gamliel, l'chude lo yerdo. Rabbi Gamliel says leave it there. Says the Gemara, what's the Shlokish to give us a nice overview? Anybody who looked at the Gemara properly would have figured this out on their own. Pshita. What's he telling us? Says the Gemara, the Chiddush is mincha haba bifnei atzma itzchle. The Chiddush is that you can donate libations. You would have thought libations only can come on the mizbech if it's connected to a carbon, not that the libation itself become a carbon. And that's the chiddush of Reish Lakish. Nesachim haboyin bifnei atzma. You can donate it on its own. And because the Rava said something similar, he lived later, but he said something similar. The Rava, misnadev adam minchas nesachim b'chol yom. You can donate a mincha of nesachim every single day. Says the Gemara, if that's what Reish Lakish's purpose is, why go such a roundabout way and give us all these dinim? Just tell us outright. The Nashmeina Kid Rava, let Reish Lakish say exactly what Rava said. Nesachim habayim hazevach, that you have libations that come with a carbon. Sorry. Kid Rava, let him just say exactly what Rava said. That is, that you can donate a nesachim on its own. So Gemara says you're right. The Chiddush is, Rava's Chiddush as follows. Shlokish Chiddush as follows. The din is, we learned before already, that you can bring your carbon today and you can bring the nesachim in a week. You can nesachim 10 days later or even longer than that. So we would have thought that if you brought the nesachim together with the carbon, well, it's secondary, and if you put them as bad, take it off. But if you brought it a week later, it's sort of independent, even though it's really part of the carbon, it's sort of independent. So maybe in this instance, if you put it on his bech after it was possible, maybe you don't have to remove it because it's now an independent carbon. And the Chiddush is because it's still connected to the original carbon, it is secondary, and therefore you have to remove it. That's the Chiddush. He says here, the Chiddush is the Sachim that comes the Zevach. They come you bring it tomorrow or a day later. So Sachim, I would have thought, we learned. Midchosam in his Kayam Balayla. It says the Midchosam and the Nesachim can be brought. The carbon has to be brought by day, but the mincha that's associated with the carbon and the Nesachim can be brought at night. Minchosam in his Kayam Lamachar. And that what that says again Minchosam in his Kayam to tell you that even Lamachar, even the following day, you can bring it. So I would have thought, it's like totally separate. You don't take it down. It's still connected to a carbon, the Shlokish says, and therefore, if you bring it on the Mizbech, you have to remove it from the Mizbech according to Rav Shimon because it's secondary to the carbon. We'll stop over here. Tomorrow morning in Mitzvah Shabbat.
Yeah.